Danielle Smith for Common Sense Calgary. We are interviewing candidates for the civic election this fall for Calgary City Council. And joining me now is your candidate for Ward 8, Natalie Winkler. Natalie, thanks so much for being with me.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you so much for hosting me and allowing me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself, my platform, and what I stand for. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. So let's begin by talking about why it is you decided to run for council this fall.
Well, why I decided, it's a great opportunity. It's an election of a lifetime, and a lot of seats are open right now on council, and it's a chance to get a lot of new faces and new ideas in council. And this opportunity will let us get away from the conflict that we've been seeing in the last 5-6 years between council members. And I want to bring my 3 C's, which are cooperate, collaborate, and compromise, not conflict. And I have been personally frustrated watching the personality conflicts that have taken place. We often know how council members are going to vote depending on who brings the application or the motion. And I don't think that represents the ward or Calgarians at all. And I have the freedom to bring an open mind. And I want people to know that although I am fiscally conservative and socially liberal, I am a true centrist. And an important part about this is that I am not backed by any political party or third party group with deep pockets. You are just seeing me, and that's why simply my slogan is accountable to you. It's a very simple slogan, and it seems to have really resonated with the residents of Ward 8. So far, I've been out knocking on thousands of doors. Yes, during the pandemic, I have been standing at a safe distance. Often we're having debates from the sidewalk to people's front porches, and they seem to be really excited about this election and excited about having their voices heard.
Let me ask you, you called it an election of a lifetime. Why do you think it's so historic? What do you think is at stake here?
I think, well, there's a lot of issues such as, and we'll get into my platform, which I have developed after talking to people in the ward, which is we're dealing with once in a lifetime decisions that will change Calgary's direction for the next 30 years. Such issues as the guidebook, as the Green Line, which is not in Ward 8, but is important because we're dealing with taxpayers' money. We're talking about the arena. And we're also talking about, is Calgary going to continue growing at the perimeter? And that is a concern. And that's where, when I talk about responsible spending and limiting tax increases, I'm not talking about cutting big, operating expenses, cutting frontline workers. I'm talking about perimeter growth. When we grow on the outsides of Calgary, it's very costly because not only do we need the roads, we need police, we need fire, and those new stations need to be properly staffed to protect those communities. And a lot of the Ward 8 tax dollars are going to subsidize this perimeter growth. So if we can limit perimeter growth and have responsible intercity development and investment, then that would make more sense for Ward 8, because we're seeing our tax dollars leaving the ward and subsidizing these communities.
Let me ask you a couple things, because you put a lot of issues on the table.
Yes, I did. Sorry about that.
So on the issue of perimeter growth, I think that the guidebook for great communities envisioned another 1 million people coming to the Calgary area. Do you think all of that can be accommodated within the existing footprint, or do you think there will be a need for new communities at some point?
Well, I think we need to look in inner city first, and nobody that I have spoken to has been unreasonable about this. Nobody has said no development inner city, and it seems that in the media they've really depicted Ward 8 as being really divided. But what we have in Ward 8 is we have some character communities where development is not appropriate, but we also have an investment in infrastructure such as the west leg of the LRT, where Calgarians have spent a lot of money putting that transit line in, and that has not been fully utilized. In that, I've spoken to people who live in the community of Shaganappi, for example, and I've spoken to the Shaganappi Community Association, and they are ripe for development. They have 2 LRT stations. They have empty lots that are waiting for developers to come. And of course, I've spoken to them about the city red tape that these developers have experienced and why it's empty. So that is where development should occur. And if we look at a 30-year horizon, will it be 1 million people, Danielle? I'm not sure. But we have the ability to develop where we already have the transit infrastructure and where it makes sense. And I think that nobody in Ward 8 has been against that. And I think that makes the most sense.
Okay, let me then transition to talking about the Green Line, because I think that's the question, right? Is that there are lines that have been built, mostly the ones going north, that are just stacked and the ridership is very high. Westleg LRT, not so much. And so how do you see the Green Line from a ridership point of view? Do you think that that is an essential project? Do you think that it's going to work the way it's been designed? Or do you think that there are problems with it that require a scrap and a restart?
Well, it's a complicated issue. And as you mentioned, we're still waiting to find out if we're going to get the commitment from the provincial government. So I think that's number one. I don't want Calgarians to be on the hook if we don't have all levels of government behind us for this kind of huge endeavor. Whenever we're dealing with taxpayers' dollars, we have to be transparent and financially accountable. These are really important things. So I don't want shovels in the ground till we know where we stand and what the possible, costs are, and have those increased. And we're seeing that with the arena, but we can talk about that after. Mm-hmm. And then the Green Line could be simply starting in sections, starting in the southeast portion. My understanding is that would help connect to Quarry Park, get some, and then to downtown. It would help get a lot of cars off Deerfoot. So as we grow, we're going to need a transit system. And I know that right now with the pandemic, transit ridership is down. But as we grow, I do believe that we do need a sustainable and efficient transit system. And I think that the Green Line could happen, but let's do it in sections. Let's move perhaps the tunnel to the last portion and assess it that way. But we need that funding, and that's really important.
All right, let's talk about the other capital projects that were on the table. So 4 big ticket items. You mentioned already the Sports Centre with the Calgary Flames, but there's also the BMO expansion, the Foothills Fieldhouse, as well as the Arts Commons. So when these were presented to council, the CFO even said, we don't have money for all 4, but they approved all 4 anyway. But let me put it to you, if you had only chosen one, or could have only chosen one, which one would you have put as the priority?
Oh boy, that's a really tough one, because as I'm talking to Ward 8 residents, they're really torn, and they're really torn about the taxpayers' dollars going into it. And we want to have a city that has exciting venues. 100%. We want entertainment. We want it to be a world player on that stage. We don't want to lose concerts to Edmonton. We don't want to lose our hockey team, but at what cost? So, for example, with the Flames Arena, there's been in-camera sessions. I don't know more information than the average person does. I know that they're asking for more funds, and there's been rumblings about possibly more land, and at what cost. So I think that we should look at everything very, very carefully and be as transparent as possible. And I can't choose one. I'm not going to choose one. And I think that it might have to go back to the people and have the residents of Calgary voice their concerns about these. And we don't have all the facts yet about everything, but it is needs versus wants, and we don't want to write a blank check either, because it will be on the backs of Calgarians. Okay, I'm going to press you on that a little bit, because I think that that's why all of them were approved, is because we had council members who didn't want to make a choice. So I'm just going to ask you one more time, of those 4, what do you think would be the best for Calgary? I would probably start with the Flames Arena. I think that would be a good start, and we could go from there.
Okay, let's then continue on talking about the issue of how you balance the spending and what you do about taxes. So give me some sense. We've talked a lot about the capital side. Let's hop on over to the operating side for a minute. Do you think that the city is spending about the right amount? Are they spending too much? Are they spending too little? How do you see the spending challenge?
I think the city, from what I can tell with the budgets and the documents that are released on the city website, I think the city is doing an okay job, but my concern is about how we're going to grow. So as I mentioned before, if we're going to keep growing at the outskirts, that's where the operating costs are going to become more and more expensive, because staffing those police and fire stations are going to be very expensive. And I think with the issues that are happening in the downtown Calgary with the high vacancy, and the commercial properties have decreased in value, we're seeing a lower tax base there. So I'm concerned about the taxes being pushed onto residential homeowners and small businesses. So this is a big concern, and that's why I talk about responsible inner city development. And if I can jump a little bit back to the guidebook, not to jump around, but I listened to all 3 days of the hearings, and I listened to Calgarians call in with very valid concerns. They were really taken off guard. I think the guidebook was well-intentioned, but whenever you take a broad brush and you try to apply it to the whole city, it's always going to cause some problems, and it doesn't make sense. So I think people had very valid concerns, and I was really also concerned about how certain council members treated Calgarians that phoned in. I think it was really disrespectful when people were just doing what is right, what is voicing their concerns. So I think the guidebook, and this may be hopefully resolved because it's coming back before the planning committee on May the 5th. So I'm going to be attending that meeting, and then before council on June the 2nd. So hopefully these amendments will take place, and then we can have this responsible intercity development, because we want people to know what to expect near them, whether they rent or they own. And I've talked to renters and owners. They're all equally concerned. They want to know what to expect in their neighborhoods, and they want the development to make sense where we've already made investment in transit. And I want to also point out one thing is an area called Altador, which is in Ward 8. So Altador has seen a lot of investment. It's got a lot of young families, which is great. It's really changed in the last 20 or so years. But one thing the province isn't and the city isn't considering, they're not talking to each other about schools. So I've been informed by many parents who have children at the Altador school that it is overflowing. Last year in grade 3, they had 60 children in one classroom. So they used a bigger classroom, and they did, to their credit, bring in a second teacher. And I'm told it wasn't an overall bad experience at all. The school rates very highly, but there's concerns that the province and the city aren't talking to each other about schools. So schools aren't a city jurisdiction, but these types of infrastructures in the communities, when we talk about development, need to really be considered, because they have really important concerns.
I totally get where you're going with that. So if you can build up more tax base in those outlying areas, then that will assist with some of the budget problems. Let me talk specifically about downtown Calgary. What do you think needs to be done there? How the last numbers I saw is that there's enough vacancy to be able to accommodate 100 to 140,000 employees. It's a lot of vacancy. So what do you think can be done about that?
It's a lot of vacancy, and it's also a lot of privately owned buildings. And some of those buildings, my understanding is the city is encouraging if the change of use makes sense. For example, the old Birchcliff Energy building on 4th Avenue, I believe, was transformed into a hotel. And I think they're opening up sometime in June. So for some buildings, they can be turned into residential, but not all of them are suited for that as well. And I caution the city too about jumping on board. Obviously, converting them to residential brings a lot of more people downtown, more vibrancy, but it also lowers the tax base for the city. The city gets more tax dollars from higher valued commercial properties. And I think what will attract the downtown is attracting people to come move to Calgary, because it's a great place to be. It's a great place to be successful. We have so many self-made first generation success stories in this city. It's more affordable than Toronto and Vancouver. This is what attracted me to Calgary. It's a place where it's what you know and how hard you work, not who you know. And I think that will work in our favor, and we'll see things, I believe, start to turn around for sure.
All right. Let me then talk about business attraction, because I think that there's sort of two issues that stem from what we've just been talking about. One is, do you use city dollars, taxpayer dollars, to attract new businesses? The $100 million that was set aside for Calgary economic development. There's still some money left in that fund. Would you want to continue with that approach? Do you think that that's the right path?
I think we can to a certain extent, but I think that if we keep the residential taxes lower, that will attract people to move here, and companies to move here because of the standard of living for their employees. I think that might be the most responsible way to do it. And once the pandemic is over, hopefully this is in sight, as vaccinations are available to those who want them, and more people will come downtown there is that downtown plan. So the city has been paying attention to this, to also encourage free parking. And once we can go back to restaurants and go watch shows, and that's where the arena comes in with maybe some revitalization, and the hotels travel can happen again. So I think we have to look at it as a broad approach. And then the city is doing what it can with tax freezes for businesses. And I think they've done what they can, and we just need to wait and see how things proceed.
Okay. Let me then ask you your general sense about private sector and public partnerships. So I think there have been some discussions about contracting out for garbage collection, a portion of garbage collection, or operating golf courses. Are you generally in favor of that type of approach? And if you are, give me a few examples of where you might want to look.
Yes, as long as it's transparent and it makes more financial sense for the city to do this, I'm not opposed to it. My understanding is some of the public pools have already gone that way, and they seem to be operating at a better standard and provide, like the Stanley Park pool, for example. They've been able to improve that facility and provide better services for Calgarians. If it is more costly for the city to have it, I don't think that is a good route to go. So privatization, I definitely wouldn't be against it. And I also want to mention, Danielle, I was talking about pools, and I wanted to talk about the importance of our parks and public spaces and reinvesting back into Ward 8. So Ward 8, as I mentioned, is a really established inner city community. And I've repeated myself over again that a lot of our tax dollars, because it includes part of downtown, go to support perimeter growth. And we would like to see a little bit of our tax money come back. So, for example, in Ward 8, I want you to know that the city has proposed the sale of a portion of a park. So it's Richmond Green Park. And that community, and it's used not just by the Rutland community that's right there. It's used by all Calgarians because it has baseball diamonds that are really popular with Little League. So the community didn't get any sense that this was even coming, that this was a possibility. So when the signs went up that 6 acres of their park was going to be sold for densification, for multifamily residential housing, they were really surprised because there are private lands and the Curry isn't completely developed. So I think our parks, especially in Ward 8, need to be protected. As the city grows, our spaces are becoming more important than ever, public spaces. And as we see with the pandemic, people are really appreciating the urban forest, the parks, the pathways. So we would like to see a little bit of our funds come back and not sell our parks in Ward 8. And also we were promised 5 years ago, the Glenmore Athletic Park on 50th Avenue was supposed to be beautified, and there were supposed to be bike lanes, permanent bike lanes put in trees. And we all submitted responses about 5 years ago. When you go to the city website, it says that there are no funds to put this project in place, and the playgrounds need to be refreshed. And so those are some things that I'm hearing from Ward 8. So it sounds like really simple issues, but protecting our parks and pathways and not selling our parks is really important.
All right. Let me ask you if this was an issue in your ward as well, the snow removal policy. I know in the new communities, especially those with cul-de-sacs, created a big problem not to have removal occur rapidly in the inside residential streets. Is this an issue that you've been hearing about in Ward 8?
Well, yeah, people have told me that Canmore and Banff, they get all their side streets, the snow removed. Why can't we do that in Ward 8? But people also understand that there is an extra cost with this. So it hasn't caused, we're on a grid system. We don't have a lot of cul-de-sacs, so it has not caused any kind of traffic issues or backlog, to my understanding. It is a wish for sure. And we've had a lot of different tie-ins from development. So our streets are quite bumpy, but that does help slow down traffic. So people are, it's a wish if it ever happens, but they understand that if it's expensive cost for the city, they're willing to do without.
Okay, I'm just staying on the theme of a few more spending issues just to get your views on them. So You've already talked about the issue of fire and the cost associated with the building new fire halls and new communities. I want to ask you about EMS and with police. So with the EMS, there's a bit of a scrap with the city and the province over centralized dispatch. The city, of course, is concerned about the response times. The province thinks that this is a way to save money. So tell me how you look at that issue. Do you agree that this was the right battle for the city to take on?
Sorry, Daniel, I didn't quite understand your question. So the city is concerned about low response times? Is that what?
Centralized dispatch. If you don't know
Oh,
the issue, that's fine. So the ambulance has, they have their own dispatch service for ambulances,
yeah.
and the province has taken it over in most of the province. And so they've taken it over from a number of municipalities. Did you follow? If you didn't follow that issue, that's fine. I can move on to the next
No,
one.
I'm so sorry to say I haven't followed that issue,
Okay.
but I have spoken to a couple police officers that live in Ward 8, and we did speak about, obviously they're in the news, it came up about defunding the police. I think that is a really sensitive topic for a lot of people. And what I want Calgarians to know and Ward 8 to know is that our police services is obviously really important. And I think that some funds can be directed towards unarmed responses. And I've talked to people who work with the DOPE team and Alpha House. And I know that when we're dealing with mental health or drug addiction, sometimes it can be better served by unarmed police officers. So when that's more of the issue that I've been following, and maybe because inner city ambulance police response, ambulance times hasn't been an issue. But when we talk about those services, this is what comes up, is the unarmed responses to help mental health and drug addiction, and people are on board with that, and they do a great job. The DOPE team is my understanding.
Yeah. So let's talk about another issue. I'm curious if it comes up, is the public art program. I think more of the black eyes have taken place in the outer communities. So whether it's the Poop Palace or the Blue Ring or the Beaufort Towers or the Wishing Well, which was burning people's clothing because of the reflection at the Genesis Center, there've been a few missteps, and I think people have lost confidence in the public art program. What about you? Do you think they've changed it in a way that you're satisfied with?
Well, now they've added a third party in that will direct the public art, is my understanding. And I think that it's a needs versus wants. And Ward 8, you know, we're so focused on not losing our parks. It's hard for us to think that, you know, the city is more interested in, we love public art, but we think that we're dealing with real issues. We're losing parks, 6 acres of a park. The city's been really short-sighted on that. We're not getting improvements in our area. So we would like to see that first, is what I'm hearing from people. And I've talked to thousands of people, and they've been really receptive to my background and to my platform. So it's public art is probably an eventuality that should definitely continue, but is this the right time? Maybe we can reassess it at some point. Yeah.
One last budget question is on the issue. From time to time, the discussion comes about of whether Calgary needs new taxation powers. It came up in the discussion of city charters. It was brought up years ago by the Municipal Association, the AUMA. More recently, in a study that was released last year, there's a whole range of new user fees and tax powers proposed. Do you think that that's part of the solution?
No, definitely not. I think that new taxes will just add more burden onto the small business owner and the consumer, and it won't pursue any business development or growth. It won't attract people to come to the city, and that's what we have. That's what we have, a wonderful city. As I mentioned, so many first generation self-made people, and that's what we should grow on our strengths. And I think further city taxes, for example, like a hotel tax, would only discourage tourism. And we're at the point where we want to encourage investment, and we need that from all levels of government, not just the municipal, but we need it from the provincial government and the federal government. And that will encourage Calgary to grow.
All right. You started off talking about relationships, and so I want to sort of circle back there.
Yeah,
when you look at the person who's now the incumbent, who's now retiring, Evan Woolley, when you look at the decisions he made in the last 4 years, are there things you would have done differently?
Well, I can only tell you I've never had a negative experience with Mr. Woolley. I'm not going to speak ill of anybody. He is retiring. He's not running for re-election, and I think that what I've been hearing from Ward 8, and Ward 8 also, the boundaries have changed, so it's also going to include part of what is currently Ward 11 and Jeremy Farkas's ward. But of the Ward 8 residents, what I'm hearing is that they just feel their voices haven't been heard. And they really want to have somebody accountable to them, not accountable to a political ideology or a third party, someone who's not able to influence, someone who can assess each project that comes before council on its merits and be unbiased as possible. Mm-hmm. And I believe that is the person that I am. I want to say that I was born and raised in Vancouver, and then I have a journalism degree from Carleton University in Ottawa. I worked in broadcast media, although behind the scenes, mm-hmm. and in Toronto and Vancouver. And then my big passion was to have people get their voices heard, and to help the underdog, essentially. And that's what attracted me to law. So I came to Calgary 20 years ago for law school. And I think and I'm telling you about my background because I think people are excited about it, and they're excited that I'm going to listen, and I want to listen. Meeting the people in Ward 8 is the best part about this campaign. I absolutely love going door knocking. I love meeting them. And so I came here for law school, and I want to let you know, Danielle, that one of the most formative and humbling experiences of my life was after first year law. I packed up and went to rural Manitoba, and I assisted residential school survivors with their claims. And that was a really humbling and very, very formative for me. And then I articled downtown Calgary, and I was called to the bar in 2006. And I want people to know I'm staying here, and I love this city. I married a lifelong Calgarian, and we've raised our family here in Ward 8. So my background and being a centrist and being able to listen and not being beholden to another political party. I know the political parties and the third party donations have been an issue in Calgary, and hopefully candidates will be able to reveal who's backing them. But with me, it's just the people of Ward 8. And I hope that that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, it's interesting to have. I want to talk to you a bit about the legal background that you have, because this gets to the role of the elected council member. The sense that I get is that there are a lot of times where the lawyers come out and tell you, you can't do this, you can't say this. It's part of the reason why they go behind closed doors so often, is they're then told, if you reveal anything that happened behind closed doors, you'll face personal lawsuits and you'll lose your house. Part of the reason why we can't have independent contractors removing snow on their own streets is because of liability issues. There seems to be almost a tyranny of the law profession at City Council. And I'm wondering if, because you have a legal background, would you acquiesce to that, or would you push back against it?
I think I would push back against that, because I'm not a fan of these in-camera sessions. I understand sometimes they have to take place, but the transparency is really important. And I think that my legal background will give me that common sense approach that we can realize what really are the liabilities and what's at stake. I am a non-practicing lawyer right now, but hopefully my background will help me with that.
All right. Let me ask you a final question then.
Yes.
Two final questions that are connected, though, related to your role as a representative. So from time to time, there have been issues that have come up that there's a question of, do you put them to the people to decide, or do you decide as the elected representative? So in the case of the Olympics, it went to the people. Fluoride, it's going to the people in the fall. Speed limits, reducing them to 40 kilometers per hour, it was suggested that go to a referendum. Council made the decision to lower them on their own. So how do you see that? Do you think that the citizens should be asked directly more often? Do you think that you, as an elected representative, should make all the decisions? Where do you find the balance?
Oh, that's a tough one, because obviously I would love to ask everybody their opinion on all the decisions all the time, but that's not actually possible. So if they elect someone that they trust, and they know they have a two-way communication, they know they're being heard, I think that they would have no problem with that representative making decisions that would represent their ward. And I think that's the way we can move forward efficiently. People right now are really paying attention to every topic, because there is no trust, and the trust has been broken, and we want to reestablish that trust with someone. That's why my signs simply say accountable to you. It's very simple. It's a common sense platform. It's a centrist approach, fiscally conservative, socially liberal, and that's what I stand for.
Okay, last question then. I think you almost answered it. I think you probably may have answered it, but let me be more specific about it. There will be times that you are given advice by the administration to approve something because they say it's in the interest of the city as a whole, but your ward constituents want you to vote a different way. So how would you navigate that?
That's really difficult because I am accountable, elected by my ward, and my ward should take precedence. But I have to look at Calgary as a whole, and if it's in the best interest of Calgary as a whole, I think I would have to really carefully consider it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much, Daniel Smith. And people can reach me at my website, which is www.winkler4ward8.ca. So that's the number 4 and the number 8. They can email me directly. Those emails come to me, and all my social media links are there.
Fantastic. That was your candidate for Ward 8, Natalie Winkler.
Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you.